Welcome, everybody, to Live Life with Sean. I'm your host, Sean Higgins. I am a lifelong information security technology expert with a passion for speaking, coaching, and writing. In this podcast, I'm going to talk about what's going on in my life. And I hope by me talking about what's going on in my life, it will help you with whatever you're going through. If you enjoy this content, please share it, subscribe to it, like it, and or leave a comment or question, as this will help others find this podcast. Thank you for joining me. And today, I just want to talk about what's been going on this past week. And it was an interesting week, from two standpoints. First, we kicked off an interesting project that I'm just really trying to wrap my head around. I've got a lead, and it's really causing me to stretch, which is good. And this was scholarship interview week. And let me explain that for a minute. Back last September, I got invited to join the CASE alumni board. It's a volunteer position, and they had a 1-year trial membership. I mean, it was trial for both of us, to see if we're interested in it. And when I was approached, the one thing that stood out for me that made me want to get involved was they have a scholarship committee. And as they described the scholarship committee, what was the responsibility of the scholarship committee was to interview the candidates, but everybody who made it to the interview stage got a scholarship. So really the interview process was really to determine not if, but how much the candidate was going to get. So I'm excited. I got excited about that. I said, sign me up. I got onto the board, and this year we were looking at between $3,000 and $10,000 for each candidate. So the interview process was really to help classify where they fit in that process. These interviews were typically done in a room on campus at CASE in Cleveland, Ohio. They're 5 days, and they run from 12 to 5. So it's a big commitment. And I was excited about going to Cleveland, but we all know COVID's hit, and COVID has made a big impact. So what happened is they shifted to doing it virtual. They used Zoom. They did, instead of one room, they did 2 virtual rooms, and they did from 3 to 6 instead of 12 to 5. I was a little concerned about that, but as I got into the interviews, man, they just flew by. It was great. And the other thing was it allowed alumni from all over. I mean, one of the guys in my room was from Indiana. There was another guy from somewhere on the East Coast. Unfortunately, I can't remember. And I heard in another room there was a guy from Mississippi. And, just being able to join because they didn't have to take time off. They didn't have to travel to Cleveland. So it'll be interesting, after this settles in for a little while, to get everybody's viewpoints. And maybe we'll do a mix of virtual, non-virtual. I don't know. Wait and see. Again, this was the whole reason that I joined the CASE alumni board. And when they announced the dates, I made sure I blocked that off on my calendar. Okay. I jumped in with both feet. I signed up for every day. It turns out across the 2 rooms, there were 2 people in each room that did the whole week. One of the people in there was one in my room was the executive director of the CASE Alumni Association. He's a paid position, and they have a number of paid positions at the Alumni Association. And I guess one of his coworkers, and they were responsible for running the room. If you've ever used Zoom, what they did was, as you joined the conference, you were put in a waiting room, and then he moved the people into the meeting room when it was their time. The other thing that was interesting, again, this is my first year doing this, because I'm doing it every day. They said, "Hey, why don't you be the room captain?" I was like, "Oh my God, well, I haven't even done this before. What am I going to do?" But what the room captain was responsible for is, first off, doing the introductory and the closing. And the introductory is a little bit of a marketing message to explain to them what the CASE Alumni Association was, what we did for them, what was available to them. I'm trying to keep it to 30 seconds. But the part that I really loved about it, and I got into this, is towards the end of my introductory, you know, I I tell them, and let me see if I can get into the space of that. I said, this interview is not a test. And even if it was, you would know all the answers because it's all about you. And many of the interviewees got a little giggle out of that. And I think at the start of every day, I think I got some giggles out of the other alumni that were helping me do the interview. The other part of being room captain was I had to keep us on time. And well, I really took that to heart. And most of the time, I kept our interviews. We gave the students 10 minutes, which seemed like a short period of time. And I think we had 7 or 8 questions, and we got through the first 6 almost always. The 7th one, we got to about 80-90% of the time. The 8th one dropped off a fair bit. And sometimes we would or would not ask them if they had questions for us. So I balanced it. I remember jumping in a few times and then saying sorry to the person who was supposed to ask the question. But again, it was, just to keep it on that time, that at which I was good at it. And I think we finished pretty close to 6 o'clock every day. One of the interesting things, and I didn't know this going in, was that if you did all days, so I did all 4 days this year, you got to pick a wild card student. And this was a student who you wanted to make sure made it to the top of the list. So let me step back here. We're going to score the students, and they run them through an algorithm, and that's going to rate them from top to bottom. But that's really the spread and how they're going to distribute the awards. I got to pick one person that I saw all week that I wanted to make sure was at the top of the list. And again, there was only 4 of us that were interviewing all 4 days. In my room, it was myself and the executive director. Again, he handled the logistics, kind of messaged us on the back end, 3 minutes, and then he'd tell me there's 1 minute left, but I got pretty good at knowing where we were in the process. And then also with us in the rooms, there were 3 or 4 other alumni doing the interviews. And the way that it worked was that the day before the interview, we got a list of, I'll call them resumes, but I think it was more answers to the application. There was an application. So what I understand about the process is that the Case Alumni Association sends out a message to various department heads, and they nominate students for the scholarships. The Alumni Association does some processing with them. I don't think they cut many students. I think we had 140 or just shy of 140 students that we interviewed over the entire week. I don't think they dropped anybody, but that's so we get these nominations. The students are then asked to fill out an application, and we were given what their answers were to that application. That application included things like who they were, what their major was, their parents' occupation, any siblings in school, just some information to help us figure out where they're going to fit. Though during the interview process, we that are doing the interviewing are scoring them on 2 things. And it's a score from 1 to 10. And thankfully, they gave us a little guide to help us say, if this is how we typically score them. 1 to 3 is this, 4 to 7 is this, 8 to 10 is this. And for the first few students, boy, I was struggling with that because I'm like, what if I grade the first person too hard compared to the rest of the people? Because, for me, I try and score people relative to other people that I've seen. So I got a little nervous at the beginning, but I got into a rhythm. It worked out very well for me. So again, back to that, we're scoring them on 2 factors. One, how well do they present themselves, their leadership, awards, and involvement outside of class. And for me, what became important here was, what are they doing besides going to school? What are they doing outside of classes that's making a difference? And the second factor for me was, how passionate were they about what they told me? You know, were they very excited, or were they just saying, I do this, I'm a member of this club? So that those two factors were important for me. Many of the students said they did research, which really didn't cause me to increase their score. But if they were passionate about their research and said, wow, I'm doing this, and this is what we're doing, and this is how we're doing it, if that passion came through, it increased my score. And I went back this morning to kind of look at how I scored students. And I think that I ended up, as I worked through this, the person walked in the room, they started at a 6 for me. And I think I scored everybody between 6 and 10. Okay, sorry. There was one person, I think I scored a 5. And they just, it was hard, because we as interviewers were trying to pull information out of them in this short 10-minute window. And it felt like he was just going to school. And which is fine, but it didn't help me say, oh, I really need to give him a scholarship compared to the other students I had seen. The other factor we're judging them on is their financial need. And what we try and understand about the students is, how are they paying for school? And many of them, their parents are paying for them. Some of them have multiple jobs. Some of them had loans. And that was one of the things we really tried to pull out of them, is how many loans you're going to have, or, do you know what the value is at the end of school? It was surprising how many students really didn't know. Their parents are paying for everything, and nope, they don't know if they have any loans. They don't know anything. There were some that, and again, we had a number of questions here. And one of the questions, as we're walking them through it, is, do you have any loans? Do you know what the value is at the end of school? Because again, it's helping us say, okay, they have a higher need on the financial side. The other one is, has anything changed in their financial planning? And, things we're looking for here were, did they have other siblings who were starting or in school at the same time? Because we know that adds an extra burden. And what we listened for, were there any job changes in their family, especially due to COVID? And there were a couple, and that's sad, that COVID has impacted a few of the families along the way. But it was good for us, because it allowed us to really, bump them up on the score, or at least me, bump them up on the scoring. A couple of divorces, and, very sad, some of those stories that they had around those. The students were given an option of whether or not to answer questions about financial need. I think there were only 2 that did not want to talk about their financial need, and that's fine. But the hard part is we didn't know how to score them financially. So I think on both of those, I gave them a 1. That's kind of the guidance from the executive director, because we really don't know. When I went back and looked at my scoring, I had a wider range here. I went from 3 to 10. The people that got the lower score, I think one of them, it was just how they came across with, oh yeah, my parents are paying. Parents are paying for everything. They saved, they did this, they're paying for the whole thing. And, so that made me move them down. And I think one of them said, it looks good on my resume. Very honest answer. I appreciated him for that. And as a matter of fact, I think when I'm thinking back and thinking about that student, I think I rated him very highly on his interview skills, because he came across very well done, very good activities that he was involved in. And as a matter of fact, I think he might have been, I don't know, I'm mixing up some students here, um, but he was very honest with us and said, "Yeah, my parents are paying for it. You know, we're doing very well." And it looks good on my resume because I think he was looking to do other graduate work and stuff, which is fair. Um, when I look back, most of them I rated between 8 and 10. And, from the question point of view, um, we each had a different question. And um, I asked them the first question because I was doing the intro and I led them right into that first question. What's their major and why did they choose to come to CASE? The next question was talking about their activities. Then we got into a couple of questions about their financial situation, how they paying for CASE. There were 2 or 3 questions here, and what we did with these questions, everybody was assigned a question, which made it good. Whoever did the financial questions did all of them. So by the time they got through their activities, I really had a good feel for how I was going to score them on their interview. Okay, because we're a couple minutes in, I'm getting a feel for them as a student. Are they presenting themselves well? And really, for me, the activities were what was going to make them go up. Most of the time up. I mean, I don't think I dropped anybody. Once I started them at 6, and I'm like, okay, how can I move them up? Oh, they do that. Okay, there's 7. How can I 8? Great. And we get into the financial questions, and I'm starting to rate them financially based upon how they're coming across here. Then if we had time, we asked them if they were unique, and I think we got to something unique about them. And one of the things I liked in one of the days, actually in a couple of the days, because we had the questions written down, but each interviewee that was with me kind of tweaked the question to fit them. And one of the formats that somebody said on this that I really liked was, tell us something unique about you that didn't show up on the application. And there were a couple times that there was stuff in their application they didn't talk about that would come up in the unique case, which allowed me to go back and say, okay, I only had them as a 7. Now they're an 8 because they really talked about that and I could see the difference. So that was a question that helped me influence some of my scoring. We wrapped up with, again, this one we asked 10% of the time, what would you change a case? Didn't get a lot of really good answers here. I mean, we had a limited sample set. And then if we had time, before I wrapped up, I would ask if they had any questions for us. And it was interesting. Each day kind of had a theme. Like I think it was Monday, we had a lot of civil engineers. And they got to sign up for the time. So I don't think they knew who was with them or whatever. It was just interesting. A lot of civil engineers, and I think Tuesday or Wednesday was a lot of biomedical engineers, but there was a theme. It was funny. But the most interesting thing was on Wednesday, almost everybody asked us a question. It was just fascinating because, and that was compared to the other days. Like Monday, Tuesday, there were a couple, and then Thursday, I don't think anybody asked us a question. Maybe there's 1 or 2. And we're interviewing about 17 students a day. I think I saw 64 students in the 4 days. I was very worried about it. I signed up for this. I jumped in. I was just like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm ready to go. I don't really care. And as I was sitting down on Monday, looking at it, looking at all the resumes, and 3 to 6, I'm like, oh, how is this going to go? But it just went like that. It just flew by. It was great. One of the suggestions that the executive director, who has done this for many times, he suggested to keep track of a top candidate each day, to help me figure out my wild card selection. And thankfully, we weren't talking about the scores, so I was able to do the scoring on my own and figure out my scoring versus anybody else's scoring. And again, you need two factors here. How did they do on the interview, and what is their need? And it's the combination of those two that make the top score. Because I had students along the way that scored great on the interview, but had a low financial need. But I also had the reverse. They weren't doing very much on campus outside of school, didn't come across very well, but they had a high financial need. So, but the wild card, I wanted to make sure that I got both. And, I was stressing a lot at the beginning of the first couple of interviews. Thankfully, they had this guide here to help guide me on the scoring, which I kept opening and I kept glancing at and saying, okay, they kind of fit here. So it gave me a range as opposed to, and they broke it into 3 categories. So it wasn't like a 1 is this, a 2 is this. It was like 1 to 3 is this, 4 to 7 is this, 8 to 10 is this, and some of the key factors in there. So that gave me a good starting point. And I remember going into the first day going, okay, number 1, how am I going to score these people? And number 2, who's going to be my top person? So the first 2 interviews go, they're okay. Not really, I didn't really impress me or something like that. And their financial need was okay. So I get to the 3rd interview, and this young woman, talked about her activity with such passion that it just really moved me. I'm like, okay, great. And I think it wasn't, I didn't want to give a 10 because I'm too early in the process, but I did make a note on the scoring sheet. She's my top. And when we got to her financial need sounded a lot higher than the first 2 candidates. So I made her my top. And then the gentleman after her, again, very passionate about his activities, also had a need. And I'm like, how do I compare it to the first one? I think I still stayed with the first one, but I made him my second. I'm just trying to keep this stuff. And then the third one, the third one after this, and I realized this, she was in the same activity as the 3rd interviewee, but she didn't seem to have the same passion about it, or it didn't come across. But I think I made her my 3rd top choice for that day. Just because I just wanted to okay, I've got 3, and if I can bump some people off, we'll bump them off, we'll move them around. And then it was a while. It was a while until late in the day that we got to this one woman, and she had a lot of activities around women's needs. Some that I remembered, she was either working or started a group for women to talk about sexual assault, Me Too. And as I was listening to her activities and the passion about her activities, I'm like, okay, how many activities are you going to be able to do any school? Because she had so many. It was just fascinating. I think I gave her my first 10 on the interview side. And on the financial side, as a single mom, and she was going to have a high number of loans at the end of her 4 years of school. So it was an easy win. She became the top for Monday, and I just it was fascinating. Going to Tuesday again, it's different. I got different interviewees with me. It's a different feel to the room. Again, I'm just tracking how she's doing. Just tracking who's going to be my top this day. So get in, going through the interviews, good candidates. I don't think I find a good mix of great interview and need, but I'm scoring them, I think I'm scoring them high. About the 7th or 8th interview, I found a person who was very passionate, very similar to my top on Monday, but just not quite the same. So she is my tentative top for the day. Um, but I'm feeling good. Okay, I've got somebody. Maybe not as good as the Monday one, but I'll go with her. Right after the break, there was a woman who there was something about her. She wasn't she that her it felt like her interview was off. I really didn't understand it. There's just something there. Um, so I placed her as my top at the time. Just there was just something about her. She had high financial need as well. And so I just replaced her with the person that I'd seen before. And then the second to the last interview of the day, this young woman came in, um, very passionate, a lot of great activities, great things she was doing. And again, tying in the high financial need. Um, she became my top for Tuesday. Though, as I sat back and thought between Monday and Tuesday, I still thought that Monday was a much stronger I don't say much stronger, but a stronger candidate for my wild card pick. Um, on Wednesday, again, different mix to the room, different people in there. It's great. Um, the second interview, great activities, jumped right to the top on activity wise, but not quite the need that some of the other top candidates had had. And she became my tentative top. um, the interview right after her was a young gentleman. He great activities, very passionate in the community, just some of the things he was doing, also a great need. He jumped to the top of my list on Wednesday, and it was just and even though there was a gentleman later on in the day who had great activities and great need, he became my second of the day. This guy was up until the last day, up until I was done. I was switching between him and the woman that I saw on Monday. I was just like, ah, man, so close, so close, and just it was a tough call. At the end, I picked a woman, just because there was just something about her that was just a little bit better than this gentleman. So, um, on Thursday, it was very interesting. This day, there wasn't really anybody that really just stood out from both factors. Okay, whether it was um, their activities or their need. I think I picked somebody later in the day just because I wanted to make sure that I picked somebody at top. Because again, I was just trying to say, okay, who's the best of today? Who's really the best? And I picked somebody, and I think that realistically, they probably would have been second or third on one of the other days. So, um, just final thoughts here. It was an amazing experience for me. I loved it. I love meeting these students. I kind of wish that there was a little more time for some of them. Um, Not sure what that would do for the schedule, but it was interesting. There were some comments from other interviewees, other alumni in the room that COVID has really clamped down on the activities, and you could see that because some of the activities were probably lower than they had been in previous years, and I think that's I don't have that experience, but some of the other interviewees kind of mentioned that. But what I really noticed is that the top students found a way. They found a way to be involved. They found a way to do something. I mean, I think there was a couple of them that volunteered to do vaccinations for COVID vaccinations. There were a couple of people who volunteered at nursing homes. So they found a way to do activities to make a difference even though COVID was shutting down a lot of things. So it was a great, great 4 days. I also, the executive director asked me, pulled me aside and said, okay, um, would you like to re-up? And I told him, if I get to do this every year, man, sign me up. So the nominating committee is going to nominate me for a 3-year post on this board, and I'm looking forward to that. And, I'm kind of torn about the format. I would have not had an issue of taking some time off from work and going to Cleveland. It's only 4 hours from where I live today, and doing the interviews in person. But, I also see the other side of it where by having it virtual, you got to get more alumni involved in the interview process. There were many people who had interviewed for the first time because they didn't have to take time off of work and come to Cleveland to do it. So maybe I would continue to do it virtually next year. It allows more alumni. They did say they had more alumni, more different alumni involved because it was virtual. It did, yeah. So I think it's good in that respect. The downside is you don't get to see them. You don't really, you see their body language from here up, but you don't get to see their full body language, how they come in, how they leave. So yeah, it was just interesting in that respect. And I think I'd like to do it virtually next year. I think one of the things that I definitely, they try and do a reception for all the award winners, and they probably won't do it this spring because of COVID, but they might do it in the fall. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that I get to go and be a part of that, because that would just be amazing, just to meet the candidates, shake their hands. Also, one of the things the executive director told me about is to meet the people who donate the money, because it's very important to them to be able to give away this money. And just fascinating. I think if there was one other thing that I would do, and I may talk to the directors about the people about this, is there's a woman who's part of the executive of the not the I don't know what, she's one of the employees for the Alumni Association. There's a small handful of employees, and they do all the stuff in the background and bring us in for doing these types of things. What she offers is she offers help preparing the students for the interviews. And she told me afterwards that the woman who won was prepared because she came to see her, which is great. And if there was one thing I think I would like to add, is to be able to offer that to the students. So maybe next year I will figure out a way to help do that. I don't know if I'll be able to do both. It'd be interesting. But anyway, one funny story. I just happened to think about this just before I was going to wrap up. The president of the Alumni Association was interviewing with me on Thursday, and she's also a professor. And one of the interviewees who came through was one of her students. Her comment to him was, "I guess I'm not your favorite professor." Because one of the things was you got to answer who your favorite professor was and why. Oh, that was funny. I don't think I thought the student was step back from that, just like, oh, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do? He didn't know up until the day before who was interviewing him. So anyway, thank you for joining me on Live Life with Sean. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I enjoyed doing the interviews this week so much. I just had to share it with you. If you'd like to book either a coaching session with me or just a time to talk with me, just go to my website at SeanCHiggins.com and find the Connect with Sean page. It's up on the top bar. Just click there, fill in your information. We'll set up a time to talk. I love talking to people, so let me know. If you enjoyed this show, please share it, subscribe to it, like it, and or leave a comment or question, as this will help others find this podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this podcast. I had fun doing the interviews, had fun sharing it with you. And until next week, have a wonderful week.